This is the Cedar Creek Church Living It Out podcast, a midweek reminder where we discuss key takeaways and principles from the weekend message to help you live out the truth that you matter.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Living It Out podcast, a weekly podcast to help remind you that you matter and help you live out that truth throughout the week. My name is Casey, and I am your host. We are so grateful for you joining us today. If you are a regular podcast listener, we are so grateful for you, and we are so glad that you're back. If it's your first time listening to the Living It Out podcast, we want to welcome you, and we are so grateful that you chose to make us a part of your day. For this series that we're in, What the World Needs Now, we're going to be taking a break from our regularly formatted podcast and beginning giving you the opportunity to hear from our lead pastor, Ben Snyder, and a few other pastors and friends who are going to be joining us throughout this series as they unpack the fruit of the Spirit. In total, there are 9 fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And throughout this series, we'll be covering each fruit, whether it's in our weekend service or in this podcast. So imagine a world where we had more joy and love and peace and patience and goodness and kindness and faithfulness and self-control. While we hope that the weekend message can cover some of these topics, it's our hope that this podcast will help unpack and give you some more additional content and ways to connect with and apply some of these fruits. So thanks again so much for listening. I hope you have a great week and enjoy.
Well, we are back finally for the end of these midweek gatherings. And we've been walking through, over the last month, these 9 fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I'll be honest, I always get a little nervous that I'm going to miss one of those.
I always get them out of order.
Yeah. But I'm curious, for you all, what was the one in this series, like kind of leading into it, prepping for it, that you were like, this is a fruit in my area. If I could find the silver bullet, this would be the one that I need I need in my life right now. What would be the one?
It's hard to narrow to just one.
Yeah. We need all of them.
It's like, yeah.
Since I have no self-control, I'll take 2. Probably peace and patience.
Peace and patience. That's
good. And our conversation about patience, just it reminded me again of some of those things. That's like, I think this is some of the work that God's Spirit's trying to do in me.
I love that. I love that.
I think I've been most convicted about our conversation around goodness, and just the importance of all those, and the weight. It's such a feels like a soft idea that it's like, oh, I need to be good, but it's like the power and the gravity of goodness, and just even a little bit of goodness in people's lives. And I fail to offer that when it doesn't oftentimes take a lot of effort for me to yield to the Spirit. So that was convicting and challenging.
I really thought the one on joy, when we talked about joy and the shame and the contrast of that and the self-consciousness of not wanting to reveal and be too joyful.
Yeah.
That was so convicting for me of like, why would I want to withhold joy in my life? Why would I want to cut that out of my life or limit that in my life?
Yeah.
So that was my favorite.
I resonate with that. That was the part that when you were talking about that, Ben, that just kind of stood out to me. Like, there's so many times I just mute and kind of I don't want that side, almost as a self-preservation or shame tactic. I just don't want to kind of be seen where someone might say, why are you so immature? Why are you so, life is a little bit more hard. And I felt myself going, I've lost that joy, and I feel like there's so much, pain and struggle and suffering and brokenness in our world, but there's a lot of good.
Yeah.
Right.
There is a lot of good. And the more I get in touch with that, I feel like the more I can play into that goodness, but it's amazing how these are so connected, which means and leads me to, the scholars often will talk about how there's really only one fruit of the Spirit, and that it's love. That love is it, and peace and patience and kindness and goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, all of these literally are attributes of love.
Yeah,
there's 2 primary emotions, love and fear. But all of these kind of fall under this idea of love, which is fascinating to me because Paul ends this conversation of the 9 with self-control. it's not like the most motivating one, right? Like you'd think it'd be like love, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and courage.
Right.
It's like self-control. Really, that's the one. That's the one.
I like courage. I like the sound of it.
Yeah, I know. It's like
Self-control is kind of like,
yeah, like
Ooh.
exactly. But I often think about this, like when we think about self-control, it feels so like restrictive.
Right.
Like it feels like, oh man, like taking the joy out. And Joel and I were in a conversation a few months ago, and I was telling him that I've seen this connection that I often use as synonyms, self-discipline and self-control. But as I kind of like started like really unpacking this, I began to realize they're actually wildly different. And in the ancient Near East, like they actually understood these ideas differently. So you'll see in like 1 Corinthians 9, Paul's writing about self-discipline. And he's talking about the need for self-discipline. That's what it says in the NIV. It says, do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. And then verse 25 is fascinating. It says, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. Now, what's amazing is that word strict training in Greek is the same word for self-control that we find in Galatians 5. And so self-discipline was understood as good habits and good patterns. Self-discipline was like the goal. I want to win this prize. Self-control, though, was the choices, the good choices that I would have to make every single day to actually get that prize. So quick time out. Joel loves when I say quick time out because I typically do this 9 times in a message.
Got it.
Everyone from Mission knows this. But I'm curious for you and each of you, when you think of self-control, like what comes to mind? Like in your life? And especially think about it when it comes to peace and patience, or when it comes to goodness, or when it comes to joy. How do you see self-control being good choices that would literally lead to more peace, more patience, or more goodness, or more joy?
Mm-hmm.
I see the choices that I fail to make.
Tell me more.
The other day, I shared, I think this story, my daughter was frustrated upstairs, and I did not have the self-control that's where I go. It's like I didn't make the choice to like take a deep breath. I marched up the stairs frustrated that she was frustrated.
Yeah.
So whenever I think of self-control, I don't think of good choices. I think of my inability, my inability, or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think of like a limiting diet. I'm like, self-control. I can't have the donuts. I can't have, like, I think of everything I can't. I don't think of it as something where you're like, how does it go along with love and joy? I'm like, those are things I want. And then you say self-control, and that's like the party pooper of like
Yeah,
the
that's
situation.
right.
Now you're taking all the fun
That's
away.
right.
Self-control is a party pooper.
It really,
You're right.
Yeah.
We're gonna reclaim it, right? We're gonna reclaim it right now. So
We're going to keep it from being a party pooper.
Yeah.
You know, I really resonated with this idea when you talked about this good habits versus good choices, self-discipline versus self-control, because I do think, it's interesting to me, there isn't, not to jump ahead, but there is an interplay between these two, and it's like, I notice that when I have a structure of good habits, like it's easier to make good choices. When it comes to like, this is what my wife always asks me, like, because this changes from time to time for me, she'll say, what's your eating plan right now? Because like when I don't have a plan, food. When I don't have a plan,
Right.
oh, here, that's your plan.
The hell?
Like when I don't have a plan, it's like each meal,
right.
I don't make good choices. Like I make bad choices each time. But if I have a plan, like this is what I do during the week, this is what I do on the weekend, or this is my eating plan, I can follow it. And I can stick with that. But when I don't have a plan, I don't have a habit or a structure or a culture of that or something, like I don't make good choices.
My dad used to always say structure breeds freedom.
Yeah.
And it took me so long to understand what that meant. But like when you have good structure, it helps, and a good vision and a good goal, the prize that you're going after. It's now up to you to go, I actually want to choose to live in alignment with that or not. And I think that's when Paul's talking about this like spirit life, this like life that is connected to the Spirit, a life of love. I mean, it's one that goes, that's the vision, that's the goal. But how often do I make choices that are more of the flesh,
Right.
more of like what I want, more that's going to benefit Steve, not actually going to be something where Christ moves. Here's the other thing when it comes to self-control for me, is I feel like self-control often gets a bad rap, and I'm so glad you said that, Ben, because I feel like it is that party pooper, because I think it's not known how to actually talk about desire. So I think often, and you talked about this with joy, and I loved it, that connection with joy and shame. I often find that our desires get shamed. So we don't necessarily know what to do with that. And so I think in some ways, we find ourselves, kind of going, I have these desires to do good, these desires to, whether for intimacy, desires for power, desires for more, and I don't know what to do with them, and sometimes I feel like afraid of them, and so what do? I deny or I detach from them. And I literally don't even acknowledge them, but they are living and churning within me. And then on the other side, there are these times where I've got these desires, and it's like, if you think about like, when I lived in Fullerton, I had this cat, and I didn't really have a cat because I'm more of a dog person.
That's what everybody says.
I know. But the cat basically lived outside our house, and it was there when we moved there. And it showed up, and it just...
You moved into the cat's house.
I moved into the cat's house,
That's
basically,
funny.
in the neighborhood. and the other owners, like renters, didn't take the cat. So it just was there in the tree looking at my son, who was 2 at the time, and he named the cat Pony, which is awesome. Well, I remember on a Good Friday service, I get a text from my wife, and she's like, "You're not going to believe this. Pony had kittens." And I was like, 8 kittens? I was like, this is not a Good Friday. Like, I'm like leading like this like adoption agency, and like basically, hey, come to our house. I'll give you after Easter, I'll give you a cat. And I just kept thinking about this, like, and a year later, Pony's pregnant again.
What?
And I didn't. And again, it's not my cat. I'm not a cat person. And I remember like my wife going, "We got to do something." I'm like, "I'm gonna go talk to her." Like, I want to go walk and have this conversation with the cat. Like, hey, like, who's doing this to you? Like, put a ring on this thing. Like, this. What are we doing here? And I realized like a cat goes into heat. There's like desires.
Yeah.
And then stuff happens.
Nature.
The nature, and
Right.
they can't actually control their desires. That's something that we have an ability to, but for many of us, like, it's almost like we have these animalistic tendencies that come over us, and I gotta buy this. I gotta eat this. I gotta have this. I mean, David and Bathsheba. David's not at war. He desires someone that he sees. He tells himself a story. I deserve her, and I demand her.
Yeah.
And again, like in one sense, we often deny and detach from our desires. And in other times, we have desires and we go, I deserve that. I demand that. And both of those are terrible examples of self-control.
Yeah.
Because we are being controlled by our desires, or we are denying our desires. I don't know, how does that hit you? Like, just, am I off here? Like, does that resonate with what you guys see in culture or even in your own life?
It seems like a cycle to me. Like the visual that I got was when you detach and deny, what springs forth then is you said I deserve, because I've denied all of this, what it turns into is I deserve something that becomes a demand that ultimately costs you. So you try that cycle over again. I'm gonna deny, or I'm detach. Okay, yeah, that was bad. Detach and deny in this cycle. Just like if I look back at my past in seasons, it's like that cycle just keeps repeating itself.
Yeah.
And so it's a spiral.
It's funny, I came up with a different visual. Like, so the cycle, I thought pendulum, but it's the same idea.
Yeah.
Like, I swing over here, and then like, that's not good. And like, I need to be more in touch with my desires, and then like, they take me over.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, that's bad. I gotta get away, you know what I mean? It's like, and it's like,
Yeah.
and we never stop in here in the middle. It's like, we're either here or we're here.
Right.
So yeah, for sure. I mean, two words that I resonated with was, either detach or I'm driven by.
Yeah.
And it's like, or dominated by,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
sorry.
thinking when you talk to somebody and you're like, hey, why why not be a Christian? Well, there's too many rules. I don't want the rules. And just that's the default answer you get often is religion and rules. I don't like it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't satisfy, right? Like it's too limiting. I want to YOLO, you know?
You only live once.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is like Paul, like he writes, and at one point he's talking to this church in Corinth, and they are driven by drama. They are driven by their desires. And he says, hey, do you all understand who you are? And I think that's often my biggest problem. I don't know who I am. Like I make decisions just like out of, I just want this, or I want to escape from this, or I'm feeling shame, or I'm feeling afraid, or I feel sad, and I forget who I am. And he goes, you know, you're a temple of the Holy Spirit, which a temple was a place that was like home of the divine. And he's like, this is like the merging of the spirit and flesh, the spirit and humanity. Like this is who you are. Like you are a temple. You're not someone who like detaches and denies. You're not someone who like it desires and deserves and is driven to like demand. Like you are someone who actually has desires. So what are you going to now do with that? And I think that's what I've come to discern and discover. Like I grew up in a home, and my parents weren't Christians, but we just didn't talk about much. I mean, most of my meals at dinner were frozen meals. My parents were gone. So I sat, and most days I'd come home, 5:30 p.m., open a freezer in the garage. I'd take out a fork, I'd stab it 3 times. I'd put it on a plate, put it in the microwave for 3 minutes and 50 seconds, and then I'd stab it again, and then 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and then I'd go get a cup, fill it with ice, usually a Sprite or a Snapple, try to beat the microwave from closing, and I would sit and I'd eat. And I would imagine like the Cosby Show. I'd imagine other homes being able to talk about these desires, but there was no coaching, there was no mentoring. So all I could think about is if we can't talk about it at this table, don't talk about it. Don't talk about my biological father, who I never really knew. Don't talk about the stuff that I was feeling. Don't talk about the questions around sex. Don't talk about peer pressure. Just eat your food. And so I just found myself denying all of these desires. And then totally in that pendulum, you get to college and you're like, oh my goodness.
Screw that, man.
Welcome to
Yeah,
Corinth
right.
or Toledo. And like, you know what I mean? And it's like, let's go.
You haven't been to Toledo? It's holy Toledo, guys. Right there. I don't care what they say.
Holy Toledo. That's it.
We're coming to Toledo.
But then all of a sudden, I don't have the skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and we're seeing this where we've got like, you know, these grown men who,
Pretty typical.
we're just trying to figure this stuff out. And I'm just thinking how genius it was for Paul to say, we're going to end with self-control. So I say all this to go, so how do we do it though? Like you 3 are parents, like how do we teach our kids this fruit of the Spirit, which is literally like mastering those desires that are going to pull you away from God's best for your life? How do we prepare our kids, prepare ourselves so that when we are confronted, because every day you're going to be confronted with something like buy this, have this, taste this, inhale this, do this for image, like that's going to pull you away. Like how do we do that? How do you do that?
Are you going to give me the answer? Or?
I know, we're like, I don't know.
I mean, I got thoughts, but I mean, I think to be with you 3, just the wisdom I feel like you 3 have. I'm curious, like what that looks like.
Some of that I think comes from not believing that God wants the best for you, right?
Yeah.
Not believing God loves you enough to give you what you like need. And so this is probably like the cheesy youth pastor illustration, but I was a youth pastor for 15 years. And so like one of my greatest like illustrations I ripped from somewhere, I don't even know, was just, you know, I had a fishbowl on the stage with a fish in it, let the kids name it, became like the mascot for the night. And in the middle of just preaching, I just took him and said, he doesn't want to be in there anymore, and just let him flop on the table and just die. And it's okay, let's get back to our scripture. and just continue reading while the whole group of teens are crying because, Sushi is dying, his last breath. And somebody always runs up.
And you named him Sushi.
Yeah. There's always a name every time I've done it. So somebody runs and ignores my preach and will pick him up, toss him in the water. And I had told them, he doesn't want to be in there anymore. That's not what he wants. No, he needs to be in there. And, like the preach on that is, God created this environment for him to live in, and there's danger outside of that. And that's not that he could desire that, but being in this is loving.
Yeah.
This is not a barrier. This is actually like a loving boundary. And the aha moment of, I know everybody wants part of your world. Like, I'm just going to get out of the water and try some things, but he already has what's best for you in mind.
Yeah.
And do you trust that? Do you know that God loves you that much?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that example.
I love that.
Just let the fishy die.
Let the fish.
I'm so captivated. I'd be watching it flip around.
Oh,
Can
there's little girls just like their lips are quivering, they're crying, and I look so cold-hearted. But
I love it.
Yeah, if you're listening,
Youth ministry illustrations are the best.
Oh, yeah.
that may
Yeah,
show up
that's
at
the
Fusion Camp this summer. Quote my source. I think it's hard. I was asking my kids the other day, like, who do you feel safe to talk to? Like, who we ask them all the time, who are like your top 5 people where you can just share whatever? And 2 or 3 years ago, they were like, they had a list. And I would say, as they've gotten older, it's like, I only talk to you, Dad. That's talking about that stuff's embarrassing. There is something about talking about your desires that's vulnerable.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not just talking about like I like an extra Oreo after dinner. We're talking about, especially young, my 12, 8. They're boys. They're growing into phases where it's like things that they thought they didn't like, maybe they are starting to like. Girls, whatever, different things, and talking about your desires. Like even for me to go, I desire to be a part of something significant. That desire driven can take me places, make me something that would destroy a lot of things that I love, But it's embarrassing to it's like, yeah, I want to be a part of something that's big, it feels weird.
Right.
There's a vulnerability with that. I don't know how you teach that to your kids, other than creating space for them to at least be able to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Let alone go, hey, what are some healthy choices I can put around that?
Yeah.
Maybe it's easier for you. I know that's delicate space.
I love that you asked for their top 5 because, at least that gets them starting to think.
Yep.
It's okay to go, they need your blessing to go outside of mom and dad and go talk to somebody about. That's amazing.
Especially if
that
they're going
open.
to talk about you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
That's something we've always prioritized too. Then there's research around that. The Florida Youth Institute did a study on this, and kids that grew up and didn't walk away from their faith had 6 intergenerational relationships, and they weren't always older.
Yeah.
Like some of them were vital to was them investing in somebody younger, and talking about their faith. And so, that's something we prioritize with our kids all the time. And there's different people, like they have different people investing in them, from small group leaders or coaches or whatever. And then as they're serving here at our church and they're investing in other kids, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. We also talk about, when we talk to our kids, we try to talk about, their whole person and the fact that God's got purpose for you. And like God's purpose for you involves, we talk about it in 4 circles. Like, there's your personality, that's one. There's the people that are involved in your life. So these are some of these relationships we're talking about. There's your past experiences, like things you've already been through, things you're learning through. But then there's also your passions. Yeah. And like these are the desires that you're talking about. And I believe those are desires that God places in us. Yeah. These are good desires. And the way we talk about it with our kids, like there's legitimate and illegitimate ways to satisfy all of those desires. Right. And there's legitimate ways that God wants. He doesn't give you a desire He's not going to fulfill. Yeah. That's the Psalm 37. He wants to give you the desires of your heart. But it's what Bree was talking about. It's doing that, pursuing those things in an environment that's healthy for you. That's an environment that God created for you. But I love your like not detaching or denying those desires, because there are legitimate ways for all of those desires for those things to be fulfilled in your life. Yeah. And yet at the same time, a lot of times they're not as sexy, or they're not as fun, or they're not as cool, or they're not as whatever it is, or not as easy.
Yeah.
And so we take shortcuts and we satisfy those things in illegitimate ways. And even as I say all that, it's like me personally, when I think about that, like that'll never leave them. Yeah. Like it's one thing to like teach my kids that, but I actually had somebody the other day, I was talking to them about their kids, and I was telling them about what we talk to our kids about, and they said, I need to talk to my kids more about that because I'm not good at that. And I said, that's why I talk to my kids about it.
Yeah, totally.
You know, it's like, it's that same thing. We were having that discussion the other day about recovery. And it's like, it's that idea that if we make it, I make it.
That's right.
And it's like the same with my kids. Like if they can do it, if we can do it, like I'm with it. I'm in it too. Yeah. And so like having those discussions with my kids helps me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And having those discussions with my team helps me. And having those discussions with my wife, it helps me. And so,
But that's so different from how you grew up. You were saying, like,
yeah,
you're
right.
so open
100%.
to having these conversations. You're alone having a TV dinner, trying to figure it out, just navigate life on your own.
Yeah. And you think about that, like the permission and safety and the conversation, what that does in building a muscle for our kids. But also it puts us a little bit on notice to kind of go, is this something that I'm actually doing in my own life? I think what's also fascinating, what I've been trying to help my kids understand, especially my son, because he's just turned 13, but when I was a youth pastor too, throughout some youth ministry, I used to teach often with like a red Solo cup. And again, they'd be going into high school, going into college, and I just said, hey, when you go to a party, you're going to be handed one of these. What really matters is not what's in this cup. It's what this cup represents about you and about what you believe. And every day you are going to be handed things or given things that are going to say something, or that you're going to say by handing them, holding them, taking them, buying it, to actually say about what you long for, something that's true, that you want to be true about you, like I'm cool or I'm in, and something that you think is true or not true about God. So all this is like identity practice. Where do you find your identity in? And so from like a red Solo cup, I would then often talk about fishing. Let's go to this one's name wasn't sushi, but I would say like, you take your son or daughter fishing, you put some bait on there, you throw out the bait, it's just dangling in there. And then all of a sudden, like you're out at Lake Pleasant, you see a little brown trout, and like the brown trout, like, can you imagine, he just about to bite it when a buddy of his goes, hey, don't do this. Like seriously, if you bite that, there's going to be a 7-year-old on the other end, and he's going to start yanking your face. And you're going to see it, that you think it's like a piece of bait, but he's going to yank your face, and they're just going to bring you on up, and all of a sudden, you're finally going to fight it, but he's going to bring you on up. They're going to take you, they're going to hold you, you're going to get a picture that's going to go on Instagram, they're going to slice you in half, put you in a cooler, then you're going to become like amazing fish tacos. Like, how awesome is that? Like, that piece of bait doesn't look that great. And so the thing that we don't often say in our home is, you got to play it out. So what's right before you, as tempting as it is it worth actually
where it leads to?
Where it leads.
Right.
Play that out. Is it, like, if you want to be a person of love or peace or patience, you want to be a person of goodness, you want to be a person who has joy like me, like, is this actually going to lead to my joy? Play it out. Yeah. And that for me has been the most helpful. And there are times in my sadness, there are times in my brokenness, there are times when I'm triggered where I go, yeah, I still want it.
Yep.
And I'm not going to deny it. I'm actually like, I think I deserve it, and I'm going to go for it. And then I'm go, Steve, you did it again. You did it again, So I find this self-control conversation is so connected to what's the prize, what's the vision, and what do I have the courage to make the choices that are actually not just something I say I want, peace or patience, goodness, joy, but it's something that I'm actually going to put into practice. So what stops you? Like, what stops you? Like if you think about what triggers you to go, man, this is what kind of leads me to make unwise choices or decisions? Is it more a feeling, sadness, anger? Is it more just like something happens, like you get triggered, something doesn't go your way? Like what?
What stops me
Yeah.
from making?
Like losing sight of the self-discipline, like the vision, the goods, the prize. Like I want that, you know, because if you lose sight of that, you're like, it's what Joel was saying, when there's no structure, and all of a sudden I'm just going to choose whatever. If I got that, I get blinded of seeing like the ultimate goal, to be like a person that's spirit-led, free in Christ.
When you're saying it's like it's the flesh and then it's the spirit, it's the temple or whatever, it just reminds me of some of those, like the temptation acronym of, we often make poor choices when we're the HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I know when I'm tired, that's when I give in to things that, I eventually have shame over, or like I feel really sad about that, in the moment there was like a temporary gratification, whatever. And so, a lot of times when I'm tired, I don't have a good plan. I'm not deliberate about that self-control, that self-discipline, and that leadership in my own life. I just kind of let the world decide for me, and when I wake up and I don't have a plan, I think, it's just it's a loose kind of day. Like there isn't a plan, there's no goal in mind, and then things happen. And
isn't it crazy too how it just picks up, and it's not just one day? It's like day 2, because I'm like, I didn't sleep well, and then I didn't eat well that day, and it's compound interest, and it's just like, and finally you got to get to a point where you're like, oh no, I got to stop and get back on. But I so resonate with that. What about for you guys?
I think I have to pay attention to when I'm hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So any of those internal places get my focus off. I think sometimes when you lose sight of joy, the idea that life is worth living, when you lose sight of patience, when you lose sight of goodness, in some ways, yes, it's the bookend that kind of wraps everything up, self-control is, but self-control I also see is the result of a life of love, a life of joy,
100%.
peace, patience lived out is, those are the things in the moment that keep you focused on the goal. And I think your question is play out where this leads. Is what this choice in front of me, play out where it goes. And when you see that, you're like, yeah, that's not really going to deliver what I hope it will, what I'm really craving. And so you can take that desire and go, where can I fulfill that legitimately?
I think the thing that I was thinking when Bree was talking a minute ago was, I think for me, like certainly same, like the hungry, angry, lonely, tired, like those are vulnerable moments, those are weak moments, like, but even greater than that, it's when I don't have my eye focused on something that's actually drawing or inspiring me. Like when it's I can't remember who said this. I want to say it was C.S. Lewis, but it probably wasn't. It's not that we desire too little or too much. We desire too little. It's like when I'm not desiring enough. Like it's when I desire more for my life, more for my marriage, more for my kids, more for my team. Like when I really desire big dreams that like I know I can't attain on my own. I'm not willing to settle for taking the bait. It's like, oh, that's ridiculous. Why would I do that? It's when I lose sight of those things. When
like a vision
so it's
for your
vision.
life.
That's what I was going to say. It's that scripture. Where there's no vision, people perish. Like things die, dreams die, relationships die. We don't have a greater vision for what's possible. What God dreams for you. Like when you don't have that side of vision, things die.
And I say this all the time because it's been probably one of the single most formational things for me is when Dallas Willard would talk about spiritual formation as vision, intention, and means. You have a vision that's white hot, wakes you up in the morning, and that vision is specific to a fruit of the Spirit or a principle or value of the way of Jesus. And it's like for a month or for a season that you are like going into training for godliness.
Right.
And you're living with deep intentionality to go, I want to fulfill that vision. And you're doing it through specific means or practices so that you're building self-control so that like when you're tempted with a red Solo cup, you're like, oh, I'm not going to take the bait. It's so much bigger. So I feel like self-control is, if our churches had more self-control online, if our churches had more self-control, if I had more self-control, like, and for me, it's morely out of my sadness or out of when I feel like I failed.
Yeah.
Or I feel like I let people down. Like that's where I feel like I lose sight of the vision. And I look for some other counterfeit God in Tim Keller language or some way to co-opt good in C.S. Lewis language to kind of use to nurse me back rather than going back to the feet of that loving kindness, that goodness of the Lord. And
Well, and when those things are undealt with, you know, that hurt and sadness, like when you don't deal with that, that creates a cloud. Like you can't see through that. You can't have that vision for that because you have all these things that you're not willing to resolve. And you can try and look around them or whatever, but you're just walking in the fog. You're walking in the, you know, blindly in this cloud where, you know, it's hard to keep your eye on that prize, you know, that you're, you know, run like but it's like, I'm running in the fog. I don't know what the prize is. I'm not even sure where the destination is. And like, I think all too often we easily get there because we don't deal with the things, or we sweep them aside, or we deny them, or we deny the impact of certain events in our lives. We don't name them. We don't speak about them. We don't deal with them.
So you said, you know, imagine if our churches had more self-control. Is another way of saying that, imagine if our churches had clear vision?
100%.
Because I think if we all had more self-control, they're like, you're right, I'm blowing it with my finances, I'm blowing it with my diet. Yeah. But if you gave them a vision of their life where they could go, man, I matter, God's got a purpose for me. I'm like, imagine what my marriage could be. Yeah. Imagine what my parenting could be, or my work, or my finances. A clear vision is what leads to clarified intentions that are going to help fulfill that, would shape the means. That is the formula.
Yeah, and like as a 3 on the Enneagram, my vision has been a life anchored in Jesus is one that has nothing to prove, nothing to lose, and nothing to hide. So that vision, that's what gets me up in the morning. I'm not trying to prove anything. I tried that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to just hold on for dear life and win. Like, no, nothing to prove, nothing to hide. I'm not I'm a mess. You know?
That's what's pulled me out. I mean, that's your vision statement for your life, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so when there are times where I'm tempted to take the bait, it is that vision statement that I come back to and go, no, this is what I was created to do. Yeah. And that's not ultimately going to fulfill that. And so I think that practice of narrowing it down, of distilling, or, you know, I know Life Plan does that. There's lots of resources out there, but putting pen to paper and going, this is one of my unique purpose calling statements for my life is what helps do that.
And then you have people in your life that you can discuss it with.
That's right.
So then it's like, and they know that desire. And they know like, oh, look at little Stevie. He's just going off on some crazy little desire. Or, no, look at you. Like you're
doing it.
You're doing it.
You're running the race.
Exactly. You know, and I think and if we can do that, then what kind of model are we for our kids? And it's hard. It's because temptation's all around us.
Well, what makes it even more difficult is, this is all nice and good, but the other side of the fruit of the Spirit that's leading us to the life that Jesus said, hey, I came that you could have life to the full, this abundant life, this thriving life. The other side of that is there's an enemy that's come to steal and kill and destroy.
Right.
And it's like, it reminds me, like we used to go in the summers there's actually a place called the Thousand Islands. It's not just a salad dressing. It's in the northeast corner of Lake Ontario, and it flows in the St. Lawrence River, and there's literally thousands of islands there. And friends of ours owned an island, and they had 2 houses on it, and we would go there in the summer for 2 weeks, and we'd take our boat. But in the boathouse there, we'd fish in the boathouse. This is when we were younger, me, my brother, and my sister, and we'd have competitions. And we're you're catching little bluegill. So like there's great fish you can catch in there, but we're just in the boathouse. They're all down there, and you throw your worm in and you pull them right out. And funny, when you were talking a minute ago, it's not only that, this, if you could say to the fish, hey, like that's gonna drink and yank your mouth, then they're gonna they don't know how to actually take a hook out, so they're gonna rip this hook out of your mouth and throw you back in. And then the thing is I'd pull the same fish out, and I knew because his mouth was all ripped apart because I didn't take, you know what I mean? It's like, and then we just keep,
That's not sad.
we'd keep catching the same fish over and over, and like this is what we do because the enemy knows the things that get us every time. And it's like, I know the moment you're weak, and I'm going to dangle this right in front of your face. And it's like, this thing dangling in my face is not what I really want, but it's right in the way of the vision of what I'm wanting to chase after. And it just kept putting right in front of me. And
I love that you're saying that desire is healthy. That's a normal, part of the flesh, and like stuffing it almost becomes like this ticking time bomb. But also the fact that like if we just look at it as, okay, I have this desire, but what is it really? What's this telling me in my heart or in my spirit or in my flesh right now? There was some diet guru person that I followed for a while that talked about, you're not craving a cookie, you're craving connection.
Right.
And I always think, man, so you could actually use your desires to lead you to your goals if you have that self-discipline, if you're just listening to it a little bit more carefully instead of just trying to feed that need.
Yes. Well, I love these kind of conversations. I feel like because it's helpful for me. I mean, just even the craving for connection or the peace, Joel, that you just talk about, like, man, for how many seasons of my life have I been that dumb bluegill?
That's how I feel right now.
Yeah, just taking and I'm like, you got me again. And he's just trying to steal, kill, and destroy. And I just go, oh man. And I think if we can be people, like you said, that are just captivated by a vision and making choices to that, the Spirit will master those desires for better purposes. So I'm excited to see what it does.
So good.
it's awesome.